Today, you're going to learn about 9 mixing tips that could be ruining your mixes altogether. We're going to identify these tips so you can avoid them, and we're going to talk about what you should actually be doing instead so you can think about music production and approach mixing in a smarter way. Let's do it. What is up? This is Jake Codeweiss with Musician on a Mission. Let's get straight to business. The first dangerous mixing tip you need to watch out for is all you need is X plugin chain. Now, there are a billion videos out there about plugin chains. For example, vocal chains. Just use this plugin with these settings, followed by this plugin with these settings, and so on and so forth. The problem is that this insinuates there are one-size-fits-all processing chains and settings that work on every single vocal. And that's just not true. Does it help to see what other engineers are doing? Yes. Absolutely. But I just want to warn you about the promise of a one-size-fits-all solution. Think about all the different variables that go into recording a vocal. You've got different singers, different rooms, different mics, positions, preamps. There are 1,000 tiny choices to be made all along the way. And I personally have never had a vocal that needed the exact type of processing with the same exact settings as someone else's that was recorded under completely different circumstances. So instead, I suggest focusing more on understanding why those particular plugins were chosen in the first place. Change your thought process to thinking, why did this engineer put subtractive EQ first in the chain? Or maybe why did this engineer use more than one compressor? Sure, you can absolutely use someone else's plugin suggestions and the order they put them in. This can be a great way to learn, a good starting point. Just make sure you're not falling into the trap of blindly following a suggestion or a technique without understanding the why behind it. I promise you, in the long run, it'll make mixing much easier and much faster. Next tip to watch out for: seek and destroy all resonant frequencies. In simplest terms, resonant frequencies are annoying frequencies that could be present in your live recordings. And this can happen with tracks that were recorded in a less than ideal environment, like a small room or a room that hasn't been acoustically treated. Yes, cutting these frequencies can make for a cleaner track. But what you don't need to do is go on the hunt for these issues. Let's say you've gone through your track and you're hunting for resonant frequencies. You may be searching for problems that aren't actually there. Maybe you hear something that annoys you in this spot and you cut the heck out of it. And then you do it again and you hear something in this spot and you cut the heck out of it. Before you know it, you've got a giant chunk of frequency content missing from your vocal. And it's going to make things sound super dull. Or before you know it, you've got a giant chunk of frequency content missing from mids, which is going to make things sound super thin. So the point is, you don't have to sweep through every single track in search of resonant frequencies. Only address the tracks with obvious issues. So for example, during your mix prep stage, maybe you listen to each track in solo. And what a lot of people do is they just pull up an EQ, create a band, and they'll start hunting for resonant frequencies without truly listening to the track first. I think you should listen to the track first and go in with EQ only if something obviously gross or harsh or unbalanced pops out at you. We're not going to dig deep into this process in this video. We've got a whole other lesson on this you can check out. I've left a link in the description. The next mixing tip to watch out for: adjust X magic frequency. The truth is, there are no magic frequencies you can boost or cut that will make everything sound awesome. If there were, we could just automate everything and let robots mix all of our music. But that's not the way it works. So, for example, on a kick drum, you might have seen something like this, where someone boosts 50 hertz, then cuts 100 hertz, then cuts 400 hertz, then boosts 3K, and then boosts 7K. This EQ curve is not going to magically make every single kick drum sound great. There is no one-size-fits-all EQ curve for every instrument. Same concept we talked about before with plugin chains. If you fall into this trap, you're going to end up with crazy mixes. So instead, educate yourself to understand the tonal qualities of each area of the frequency spectrum. And if you do, you'll know why you may or may not need a boost somewhere in the 50 hertz range, or if you actually need to cut out any in the mid-range. And again, we're not going to dig deep into this topic because it's a huge one. Not in this lesson anyway. If you want to know more about this, make sure to check out our EQ balance chart video. Again, I'll make sure to leave a link in the description. Next mixing tip that could be ruining your mixes: compress everything. Compression can be an awesome tool, but you don't need to use it on everything. In fact, I see a lot of people using it incorrectly or too much, and it completely squashes the life out of their tracks. Yes, compression can be used to help control dynamic range, or it can help make things sound punchier, but if something is already punchy enough, or something is already within an acceptable dynamic range where it's not getting buried in the mix or poking out of the mix in a distracting way, then do you really need to use compression? And this goes double for samples, okay? A lot of times loops and samples like this, they're already compressed or they're already dynamically stable. For example, take a look at some of these loops. Got this one here. You can just zoom in and see. There aren't like a whole lot of really tall peaks or really deep valleys here. And if we look at the meter, we can see the dynamic range here. It's not really peaking up way out of control here in any particular spots. It's not really dipping down below a particular level. The dynamic range is just kind of hovering around this area here, which is great. I wouldn't necessarily compress that, especially something like this. Right? I mean, that is hard limited. That's a solid chunk of waveform there. Right? Totally consistent. You don't need to compress anything like that. Then what about this guy? Let's take a listen. Oh yeah, simple bass snare loop. Check out the meter. I mean, it looks like the sample itself, it's already hard limited, and it already sounds punchy enough to me. Sure, you can add a little bit of extra compression if you wanted to, but it's not totally necessary here. What about this? Yeah, same with this guitar part. Check out the meter. To me, that's an acceptable dynamic range. Nothing really super loud, nothing super quiet. Let's check this one out. So now we've got a couple of notes in here, and you might be thinking, okay, this is a time where we might be able to use compression to just bring up these quieter notes. But to me, I'd rather just do some creative editing here, kind of cut out the region and increase the gain a little bit so that that waveform kind of matches the thickness of the other waveforms. And we can get a little bit more picky here and maybe increase the volume of this note here. And now we've got a much more kind of dynamically consistent track without having to use compression. The point is, I want you to understand that you don't have to just add compression because you think you need to. It's okay not to compress things. Instead, mix with intent. Use the tool only when you need it to accomplish a specific goal. The next mixing tip I think you should kind of be aware of and look out for is never use presets. I don't agree with this. Many plugins come with presets, and for things like EQ and compression, I would generally stay away from them. You want to know why you should be using these things first. Again, this is kind of following the one-size-fits-all concept and promise. We know that that's just not true, and that doesn't work. However, some presets can be super helpful when it comes to certain effects, specifically wet effects like reverb and delay. You don't have to start from scratch and spend a ton of time dialing in something that sounds killer. So, for example, let's say I wanted to add reverb to this dry vocal here.
Sunshine, sunshine, oh, let it shine on me.
So I might start by just scrolling through some reverb presets, see what sounds good.
Sunshine.
Let's adjust the mix a little bit.
Sunshine, sunshine.
And go to some presets.
Sunshine, sunshine. Oh, let it shine on me. Sunshine.
Sounds pretty cool. Let's go to the next one.
Sunshine, sunshine. Oh, let it shine on me.
Nice. Might just bring the mix down a little bit, but I like the way that sounds right off the bat without really tweaking anything.
Sunshine, sunshine. Oh, let it shine on me.
It sounds great, right? And that comes from a preset. And if I wanted to tweak things, I could. Let's try some delay instead. I'll just scroll through some presets to see what sounds awesome.
Sunshine, sunshine. Oh, let it shine on me.
Here it sounds with the ping pong, maybe an analog.
Sunshine, sunshine. Oh, let it shine on me.
And then you can always make minor adjustments from here inside of the plugin. Like you start with the preset and then make adjustments. I'm hearing a little bit more high frequency content that I would like from the actual echo or from the actual delay. So I'm going to use the filtering option here and low pass that out.
Sunshine, sunshine. Oh, let it shine on me.
Maybe clean up the lows a little bit.
Sunshine, sunshine. Oh, let it shine on me.
Nice. I didn't really have to do much there. I just started with the preset. So the point is, presets on certain effects are going to help save you time, improve your workflow, and can make you a more efficient mixer. Next tip to watch out for: never use more than X decibels. So a lot of people are going to tell you these kind of rules or to stay within a box where you shouldn't boost or cut a certain number of decibels in either direction. Or maybe you've heard not to go above a certain number of decibels of gain reduction when it comes to compression. And I think the intention here is good. I think most people mean to warn you about not mangling your recordings by turning them into this messy slop. But I also think this kind of hard stop thinking can actually hold you back from getting the sound you want. For example, I've got a kick drum here. Let's say I want a more clicky high end that you might hear in a rock mix or maybe a metal mix. But the quote unquote rule is that I can't boost or cut more than, let's say, 4 decibels in either direction. So let's try to get a kick tone from EQ here while keeping that rule in mind, right? 4 decibels. So no more than 4 decibels in either direction. So first thing I'm hearing here is I want to clean up kind of like the boxiness. And then no more than 4 decibels. Remember, 4. Here, let's be exact. And this is a hard rock or metal kick drum, so maybe I want to add some click. No more than 4 decibels. All right, that sounds okay, but let's just forget about the 4 decibel rule for a second and get more aggressive with our settings and see what we can get. Okay, first with the mids, I want to scoop those out even further than 4 decibels. Great, 9. Now let's get some more click out of that kick drum. That is smacking harder. It's clicking the way that I want it to click. This sounds much better to my ear and much closer to the mark I'm trying to hit. But if I were to follow this weird 4 decibel boundary or parameter or this rule, I wouldn't have been able to get to that sound. And same with compression. Let's say I really want a ton of punch out of this kick track. So I slap a compressor on there. 4 decibels of gain reduction. Okay, let's say we've got a 4 decibel rule here. So let's dial that in. That's about 4 decibels of gain reduction. I'm not really hearing a massive difference here. What I want to achieve with this kick drum is a really solid, like punchy kind of transient. And then I want to squash the end of the sound. I want the tail to kind of dip back in the mix, right? And I just can't get that with 4 decibels. So let's crank this threshold a little bit more. Let's scrap that rule and experiment with some more aggressive settings. And that knocks much harder. It slams you in the face a lot harder. And that's the sound that I wanted to go for. I wouldn't have been able to get there if I was staying within the confines of these weird limits and these weird rules. The point is, don't limit yourself too much. Don't be afraid to break conventional rules or think outside the box. Sometimes it's the only way to get the sound you want. And I think it was Chris Lord-Alge, he's a Grammy-winning mixer, who said, there's no wrong way to make a sound. Next tip to watch out for, copy your reference track. Referencing other people's mixes is a great way to make sure you're on track with your own mix. As a matter of fact, I think it's the best way. But remember, you can never copy someone else's mix and expect to get the same exact result. The production process is a series of 1,000 small choices. No two people are ever going to make all the same exact choices. So don't drive yourself bananas trying to get the same exact snare sound as your reference track, or trying to get the same exact guitar tone as your reference track. Instead, I found it super helpful to use not just one, but at least 3 reference tracks per mix. And I like to think of it as putting together a micro playlist. What I do is I play each song, including my mix. This is our theoretical mix bus track here. So I'll just cycle through each one of these. I'll play them side by side with each other, comparing. And as long as my mix has a somewhat similar balance and doesn't stand out in an obvious or distracting way from the other 3 references, then I know I'm on the right track. And this approach has allowed me to disconnect from the mentality of trying to copy something exactly, which is perfect for someone with OCD like me. And it makes it so I can take more of a law of averages approach to referencing. And ultimately, it makes the whole mixing process a lot less stressful and a lot more efficient. The next mixing tip to watch out for is never mix in the recording phase. Yes, it can be helpful to compartmentalize the different phases of the production process, where during the recording phase, you're strictly capturing sounds or selecting samples. During the editing phase, you're just editing. During the mixing phase, you're just mixing. But if during the recording or the programming phase, you hear an opportunity to mold a specific sound into place because you think it'll make your life easier further down the line in the mixing process, I say, why not do it? For example, let's take a listen to this. Let's say I'm in this recording process and I'm thinking to myself, these guitars sound a little heavy in the low end and it's clashing with the bass and the kick drum a little bit. Well, I'm not going to wait for the mixing process to clean up the low rumble. I'm just going to quickly add a high pass filter to tighten it up. So let's go ahead and do that. Got some filters here. Let's listen to the guitars. You know, maybe cut out any unnecessary high-end fizzle here too. Super quick, super easy. And the point here is I think doing a little bit of quick processing here and there in the recording phase is totally okay, as long as it doesn't cause you to go down the rabbit hole and hinder you from actually making forward progress recording or programming your tracks. And the next mixing tip to watch out for is always bus your wet effects. And I think bussing wet effects like reverb and delay is a super useful tool, especially if you know you're going to be sending a lot of tracks to something like a room reverb to create an overall cohesive sense of space. I found that sometimes creating an aux track can just make things messy and unnecessarily overcomplicated. For example, if I have a snare drum, let's see here, that I just want to add a bit more space or width to, I won't create a whole new aux track for that. Instead, I like to add reverb directly on the track and use the wet dry knob or the mix knob to balance the effect. So let's dial that in. First, let's just listen to the loop. And let's narrow in on just the kick and the snare. You can hear how dry the snare is here. And let's say I wanted to add a little bit of reverb to it. Let's just go with a preset. See what that sounds like. And in context, yeah, I think that sounds great. And that's with reverb directly on the track. I don't see a need to actually add a whole separate auxiliary track for that. Another place I might consider doing that, just adding the insert directly, is on vocals. So let's take this vocal chop track, for example. I know that whatever wet effect I select for this, I'm not going to use on any other track in the mix. So there's really no need to create a whole new auxiliary track for it. I'll just add it directly. So let's do some delay. Again, let's just kind of sort through some presets here. And having luck with this double S. Let's start there. We're just going to solo the vocal. Turn down the mix. Sounds great. Bring down the low pass. Let's just cycle through this section, see how it sounds. I think that sounds pretty dope. Main takeaway here is yes, it can be helpful to use aux tracks, buses, and sends for your wet effects, but ask yourself if you need to use them. Or are you just overcomplicating things and cluttering up the mix window? Basically, I'm here to tell you that it's okay to apply wet effects directly to your tracks or buses. Sometimes it's just easier on the brain. So there you have it. Those are the 9 mixing tips to watch out for. And I hope this video helps reframe mixing for you a little bit, has given you some things to think about so you can improve your process and see better results in the studio. But these are just a few mixing tips and tricks, right? You can implement these in your workflow and still end up with mixes that don't sound great if you're making mistakes in other areas. And once you've learned the production process, there's still a lot of other stuff you need to get right if you want your music to sound professional and start earning an income as a musician. So that's why I put together a free training where I share with you predictable and practical ways for you to take the skills you have in music and use them to build a career in the industry and get paid for doing what you love. So if you're ready to get professional sounding productions, take those skills into the music industry and create a side income, or even toy with going full time as a musician or as a producer, then make sure to check out that training. You can either click the link you see on the screen now, or you can head to the link in the description to get access. It's completely free. And if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe for more music production tips and tutorials. That's all for now. This is Jake Codeweiss with Musician on a Mission, signing off. And may your next mix be your best mix yet. See ya!